Shocking truth, 7 dark reasons you'd never survive the Titanic haunts your dreams forever. The night was thick with fog, an unsettling silence wrapping around the mighty Titanic, a ship carved from steel and dreams. As it sliced through the icy Atlantic, a whisper of anticipation swirled among the crowds. But lurking beneath those polished decks were shadows darker than the water itself. 7 haunting truths hung in the air like a storm cloud, each more astonishing than the last, and each dripping with dread. The first. The lifeboats. There were barely enough for half the passengers. Can you imagine the screams of those left behind? The fear gripping their throats like a vice. As the ship sailed gracefully into disaster, the second reason loomed larger: a captain too confident, too stubborn to heed warnings about icebergs. Nights like this, when dreams were supposed to be realized, turned instead into nightmares. The passengers felt an unsettling chill, but they had no idea just how close to doom they truly were. There was an air of satisfaction that evening, yet that satisfaction was fragile, hanging by a thread. But wait. The third truth was revealed in hushed tones: an unthinkable curse tied to the very ship that promised luxury and escape. They say that the Titanic bore the weight of tragedy from her very conception. Those who built her didn't just fashion steel, they summoned something darker altogether, a malevolence destined to awaken. This escalating tension was palpable, swirling like the icy Atlantic water below. Rumors spoke of ghostly apparitions, the spirits of sailors and victims of the past intertwining with every dance on the grand staircase. As the clock ticked towards fate, the fourth truth whispered promises of chaos as a warning siren echoed from the bridge. How could a sleek vessel drown in such opulence? How could hope shatter so swiftly? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Now, back to the wave of terror crashing onto the scene. The fifth shocker unfurled a passenger list filled with the world's richest, their fate entangled in the darkness of the night. Who would survive? Who would perish? Hearts raced in anticipation. As the warning bells rang, the last moments cloaked in chaos began to unfold. The lifeboats were launched, but one was doomed. A chilling silence fell around it before a sudden scream shattered the night sky. A haunting fog rolled in, cloaking the ship in a blanket of uncertainty, a chilling premonition of the icy grasp of death. The sixth truth completed the picture: a furious captain caught in the storm of human error, too proud to ask for help. Echoes of doubt filled the crew's hearts as they scrambled, desperate to navigate a rapidly sinking fate. Tragedy drew close like a friend with horrible intentions, and just as it seemed hope would flicker out into nothingness, the seventh reason ignited sparks of fear as one lifeboat screamed back to save the lost, a daring attempt that set destiny in motion. Who would make it back? The tension tightened, hearts thumping, breaths held. In that eye of the storm, surrounded by peril, one question lingered: who among them had the will to survive the harrowing truth of the Titanic? The air crackled with adrenaline, but so did the eerie whispers of foreboding. As the frantic passengers scrambled for lifeboats, chaos erupted on Titanic's decks. Voices rose and fell like the waves crashing against the ship's metal hull, all swallowed by the fog that seemed to thicken with each passing moment. It was as if the very ship resented the turmoil she birthed, her once regal silhouette now a dark shadow stripped of glamour. "Get to the lifeboats!" shouted a crew member, his voice strained, as he pointed towards the swaying crafts hanging precariously over the edge. Panic coursed through the passengers' veins, desperation turned mothers into wild animals, and brothers into rivals. For one fleeting moment, a man and a woman locked eyes across the deck, their shared understanding that survival was not guaranteed. Only the cold grip of fate awaited. A huge crack echoed across the deck, louder than any naval gunfire. The ship quaked as if retching on her own ambition, an embodiment of human pride suddenly humbled. Those aboard felt it in their bones. Fear turned palpable, it latched itself onto throats and whispered dark prophecies in ears. But hope flickered like a lone candle resisting the gusts of death swirling around them. A lifeboat hung from the side, wavering under the frantic efforts of a lone crew member, determined to fill it against the chaos unfolding. The crew member, a man named Thomas, fought through the mob. "This way," he yelled, but his command was lost in the cries of panic. Suddenly, from the depths of the crowd emerged a voice filled with wrath, a wealthy businessman who had grown used to getting his own way. "You can't do this. My family must get on." He shoved his way past others, fists flying, leaving sorrowful souls in his wake. Thomas watched in horror as people fell to the frigid deck, trampled beneath the weight of greed and desperation. "You must think. We can only save a handful." He knew the bloody truth pushing and shoving would lead nowhere. As the boat finally began to fill, the icy Atlantic rumbled beneath them, a reminder that it was not merely a good night gone bad, it was the beginning of a reckoning. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. In that moment, a bone-chilling scream tore through the air, cutting like ice. Up above, a woman, tangled in her satin gown, teetered on the edge of the ship as the majestic vessel finally succumbed to her fate. The horror dawned on the crowd. This wasn't just a rumor, this was their undoing. And she, a ghost of elegance and despair, became the embodiment of their collective terror. Around her, people's movement slowed, as if time had momentarily halted to catch the tragic refrain. The realization struck everyone: if they didn't act quickly, this would be their legacy of inaction. Lives would be lost, dreams shattered, futures uncertain. In this game of survival, who among them would stand up and make a choice? Just then, the water began to pour over the deck, swiftly devouring the ship's grandeur. The cries turned into frantic pleas, fear surged hotter than the cold Atlantic. As Thomas wrestled with this chaotic reality, he caught a final glimpse of the drowning woman, her face reflecting both despair and a haunting beauty. In that fleeting moment, a question pierced through the storm, begging for an answer. As the sea rose around them, would they rise to the occasion or let their humanity drown amid insatiable survival instincts? Some had chosen their own path. Others would pay the final price. The first lifeboat was full, the others still awaited fate, while water lapped at their heels. The Titanic was sinking, and only one thought remained: who would be left fighting against the cruel tide of destiny? The lifeboat hung perilously close to the ocean's cold grasp, teetering like a pendulum on the edge of doom. Thomas fought against the chaos, his heart pounding like a war drum. Every face around him twisted in terror or desperation, their once refined features reduced to masks of sheer panic. "Help! Somebody, please!" a voice cried, piercing the din. It was a young mother clutching her child, her eyes brimmed with desperation. Her plea hit harder than the frigid air. Thomas's blood froze at the sight, fear clawing at his throat. He knew they were running out of time. The ship shuddered again, a deep groan echoing from the belly of the steel beast as if it were alive, screaming for help. Water surged over the deck, icy tendrils wrapping around their ankles, pulling them toward the abyss. The stench of fear and sweat mingled harshly with salt and metal, tickling Thomas's nostrils like an angry warning. "Faster!" a passenger shouted, shoving past another, their eyes wild. In that moment of desperation, the balance of humanity tipped dangerously. Thomas reached toward the lifeboat, balancing clarity and chaos. "One at a time. We can't risk it." But it was too late. Another lurch from the Titanic sent a wave crashing over the deck, knocking together the scrambling bodies. In an instant, the fragile thread of civility snapped. A man under duress lunged, grabbing the edge of the lifeboat, dragging it closer to him like a desperate child. "I'll drown if you don't help me." The lifeboat passenger cast a desperate glance at Thomas, eyes pleading but filled with fear. Here, in the heart of madness, stood a choice, a clash of moral grounding and survival instinct. Did he save this man? Risk losing the lifeboat's capacity for others? Survival hung in the air, heavy as smoke from a forgotten fire. the icy Atlantic surged angrily, sending even the bravest souls tumbling. In that moment, Thomas reached beyond the chaos, gripping the edge of the lifeboat and pulling the man up with as much strength as he could summon. Just as despair swelled, a sharp screech erupted above. The woman on the edge lost her fragile grasp and plummeted into the hungry sea below, swallowed whole like a dream fading into darkness. The crowd collectively gasped, a mutable wave of horror washing over them, cutting deeper than the frigid water. Silence reigned, punctuated only by the distant wails of the drowning. Souls trembling in the grip of crushing fear seemed to pause, suspended in disbelief. Suddenly, the ship jolted again, wrenching the crowd back to bitter reality. Faces once filled with dreams were now tainted with dread. "Get to the lifeboats!" Thomas cried, his voice splintering against the sheer noise of panic. The lifeboat had space but was still life hanging by a thread. Thomas watched as frightened pairs of eyes surveyed the dwindling deck, weighing their fates. The ocean was closing in, icy fingers pooling around their feet, inviting them to the chill below. Just then, as if the sea conspired with fate, a shadow broke through the fog. Another lifeboat paddling desperately towards them, caught in the tide. Shouts of hope ignited, but was it truly salvation or another false sheen of hope before the fall? That moment of peril shattered the air as if the universe hung in balance. Thomas stood frozen, knowing that the next choice might mean life or doom. As the ships neared each other, dark figures loomed in the water beneath. How many souls clung to life below? How many would vanish forever? The question hung heavy in the air. When hope emerged, would it be their savior or would it reveal deeper horrors lurking in the waves? As the darkness surged, the chorus of gasps returned, mingling hope with the explosive sound of a heart trying to beat against fate's cruel hand. Would they rise, or would they fall? The heartbeat of survival thrummed in Thomas's chest, echoing the inescapable truth: the night was still young, and darkness offered no guarantees. In that unsettling moment, each face reflected not just fear but something deeper, a longing for connection, for a fight that might afford them the chance at life. And then, they saw it, the unmistakable flash of something beneath the invisible surface, its shape shifting like a nightmare made flesh. As reality sank in, the question twisted through the crowd like a noose: could they endure the tide, or would they succumb to the unfathomable darkness below? The other lifeboat drew nearer, each frantic stroke of the oars revealing strained faces, their urgency now visible even through the mist. Thomas squinted against the wind, heart racing. Were these souls saviors or more terrified souls grasping at a fleeting chance for life? "Over here!" he shouted, voice barely making it above the howl of the wind and the roar of the dark sea. Panic surged in his chest, demanding to be released as he waved his arms over his head. He needed them to see the desperate group crammed into the lifeboat, but the chaos around him threatened to drown even that faint hope. Yet, as the vessel approached, something else caught his eye: shadows slipping just beneath the surface, circling slowly, methodically. He took a step closer, grasping the side of the lifeboat, bracing himself against the rising swell. The figures moved with unnatural ease, their shapes flickering within the turquoise depths, teasing him like a memory fading away. "Look! In the water!" he yelled, fear choking his words as he turned to the others. Their eyes darted around, blending disbelief and terror in a growing frenzy. "We're not alone." The shadows twisted, rising in haunting eddies around the ship like dark whispers beckoning them down. Shouts erupted as people exchanged frantic glances, unsure if they should leap into the lifeboat or shrink back from the looming dread of the ocean. The young mother with her child pulled closer to Thomas, her hold on the boy tightening as if to shield him from what lay ahead. "What's out there?" she gasped, eyes wide with horror. "I don't know," Thomas admitted, his heart racing. "But we can't." A bone-chilling scream ripped through the night, cutting sharply against the chaos. It belonged to another passenger, their panic tilting the fragile balance of sanity on the ship's deck. Just then, the lifeboat finally reached them, but it was already teetering on the edge as they tried to draw close, the weight of wet bodies and hearts full of fear creating a palpable tension in the air. "Get in! Hurry!" A voice rang from within the lifeboat, frantic yet filled with desperation, ringing like a bell over the cacophony. Like a tide of wild desperation, people surged forward, but Thomas hesitated. He could feel that strange force lurking, something dark crashing beneath their feet, waiting for the right moment to take them. He had seen enough of nightmares manifesting into harsh realities. A man stumbled past him, flailing wildly as he fought against the terror. "They're coming! They're coming!" he screamed, voice breaking, eyes wide as he pointed at the water, where the shadows gathered tighter, swirling ominously. "Stop! Calm down!" Thomas shouted, but it was too late. The man's panic rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Chaos erupted again as bodies pushed and shoved towards the lifeboat, fear compelling them to forsake their others. In that moment of sheer madness, the lifeboat itself rocked precariously in the water. Thomas watched in horror as two figures tumbled backwards into the icy depths, swallowed whole by the waiting sea. Amid the chaos, seconds stretched into eternity, every heartbeat echoing against the rising tide. Thomas's decision loomed heavy. He could rush to fill the lifeboat or stay back to help those still clinging to sanity. And then they all heard it, a low, resonating hum, a sound that seemed to echo from the deep, vibrating through their bones. Slowly, it rose like a haunting symphony, an invitation to embrace their fate, the melody laced with chilling pleasure. "Please someone!" the mother cried, eyes darting between the water and Thomas, but her voice was lost in the growing tumult. What terrible forces were stirring beneath? As the dread thickened, shadows shifted closer, dark tendrils reaching for the desperate souls above. Thomas knew they were standing on the edge of oblivion. Would they grasp for survival or succumb to the whispers calling them into darkness? As hope flickered, a terrifying thought struck him: what if salvation lay not just within reach, but in something more sinister? Hidden in the depths. Could they truly trust what rose from those waves? Or was it a treacherous fate, ready to drag them all into the abyss? Thomas's mind raced. He was caught in a whirlwind of choices, each one darker than the last. The screams of the passengers blended with that haunting melody rising from the depths. It was seductive, almost lulling. But there was something primal in that sound, something that sent a chill wrenching through his gut. "Let us in!" someone yelled, desperately clinging to the realities of survival. But that reality was slipping further away. The lifeboat rocked violently as more terrified bodies tried to clamber in, their collective weight tipping the precarious balance. Water sloshed over the sides, creating a thin veil of uncertainty that threatened to drown them all. Thomas looked to the mother and her child, their faces drenched in terror. If they didn't get in now, if they didn't make it! A sudden wave crashed against the side of the lifeboat, sending it careening dangerously. The cries rang louder, more desperate. "Jump! Jump now!" someone screamed, their voice barely making it through the chaos. The others hesitated, paralyzed by fear, overwhelmed with the choice ahead. Could they risk it? Everything was spiraling, and the shadows churned beneath. Then came another scream from the depths, a shrill cry that cut through the panic, freezing everyone in place. The shadows had taken someone else, a gentle sweep before they vanished into the dark. "Thomas!" It was the mother's voice again, pleading. "We have to go." She was breathing heavily, her face marked with desperation. "They won't wait for us." The lifeboat jostled again, and one more body fell back, plummeting straight into the abyss. Thomas's heart shattered along with that fleeting chance of safety. He looked desperately at the faces around him, those filled with terror, fragility, and a raw drive to survive. "Get in!" he barked, urgency eclipsing his uncertainty. "We can't stay here. The water, it's hungry." With renewed vigor, the crowd surged forward again. But there was only room for so many. Thomas's mind was spinning, thrumming with urgency, while the shadows continued their slow, deliberate dance below. He reached for the mother, desperation fueling his movements. "Pick your child. Just jump." As she hoisted the boy onto her hip, time twisted. The shadows twisted too, morphing, shifting, as if drawn to their fear. Thomas felt a prickling at the back of his mind, a whisper that warned him this wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a confrontation with the unknown. Then, a huge wave crashed particularly hard, where the lifeboat crested, and in a sudden surge, Thomas was thrown against the edge. His breath escaped him as he struggled to clutch on, the dark water below bubbling and frothing, growing more animated. They were staring into a churning nightmare. The sinister melody rang louder, now almost a cacophony, resonating in his bones. And just like that, the shadows erupted from beneath, huge, dark forms slashing through the water, shadows made of nightmare material. Breathless with fear and realization, Thomas roared, "Get in now. We have to move." But the moment swept out of their control as those shadowy figures reached for them, tendrils stretching, curling. Panic gripped everyone, a free-for-all driven by primal instincts. Bodies erupted around him, each frantic push, every scream, an echo of madness. Then came the moment when shadows collided with a gasp of air, a screech echoing like a banshee's wail. They weren't alone in the dark. Something monstrous was rising, cannibalizing the fear of the remaining desperate souls. A glimpse of a scaled form, glimmering, came above the water. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. He made a decision that he shouted at the crowd, "We fight. Together." But would they listen, or would they crumble under the weight of their fear as the monstrous reality emerged, gasping and waiting? Who would lead them to salvation, and who would be lost to the depths? The surf crackled around him, each wave promising another gut-wrenching loss. The lines were being drawn, and it began to feel like those sacred choices would not be his to make. The darkness beckoned. Still, its siren call growing louder. Would they embrace it or dare to rise against the tide? With every instinct screaming survival, Thomas wondered if the truth would strand them all in the dark, or if the light might one day break through. But in that moment, all they could do was fight against the pull of the abyss. Would anyone withstand the tide? And then, as figures began to form on the surface more than shadows, Thomas thought, what if the real horror was yet to come? The shadows surged upward, and panic morphed into sheer terror. Thomas's heart thudded against his ribs, each beat a reminder of mortality clashing with the primal urge to survive. "Fight!" he shouted again, his voice straining against the frantic cries. The lifeboat swayed dangerously, the weight of desperation pulling them down. He caught the mother's eye, her breath hitching, and he saw her determination flicker like a waning candle. "Stay close," he urged, feeling a spark of collective resolve ignite among the frightened crowd. They could either face the darkness together or succumb alone. The monstrous figure breached the water with a force that sent sloshing waves over the lifeboat. It was their scales shimmering in the dim light, large and glistening like an otherworldly nightmare. Panic was palpable around him, expressions etched with visceral fear. As the creature's massive head lifted, revealing rows of glistening teeth like jagged stones, Thomas felt the air thicken with dread. The shadowy tendrils lashed at the edges of the lifeboat, searching for an opportunity, ready to drag anyone within reach into the depths where horror dwelled. People screamed, body weight shifting as they sought to escape from the writhing mass. A split-second decision pushed Thomas into action. He turned to the crowd, urgency imbuing his every word. "Grab whatever you can, anything to fight back." His voice clung to the edge of hope, igniting something dormant within the crew of terrified souls. Hands scrambled, finding whittled oars and pieces of wood, anything with which to fend off the inevitable. The mother gripped her child tightly, her eyes radiating steel. Thomas grabbed an oar, brandishing it like a weapon. "Let us show this thing what we're made of." They formed an unlikely line as the dark figure flicked around, sharp jaws snapping. Several hit the water's surface, instinctively clutching one another and preparing for the worst, yet somewhere in that simmering despair, a fierce spirit ignited. The whiplash between courage and terror held them together, grand splashes echoed, and as the nightmare lunged, Thomas swung the oar with every ounce of strength he could muster, striking the shadowy appendage. A ripple reverberated through the air, and for a brief moment, a gasp, a shared breath of hope. The tendrils recoiled. "Again. Keep hitting it," he roared, and they followed, bodies moving in sync, fueled by sheer human resistance. Each connection felt electric, the adrenaline coursing through them, pulling the remnants of humanity from the brink of despair. but then, amidst their screams and chaos, attention shifted back to the deeper shadows beneath. From below, the haunting melody returned, seductive and caressing, like a lover whispering forgotten truths. It tapped into their fears, luring them, promising release from their torment. Don't listen to it. Fight against it. Thomas screamed, knowing the siren's song was an enemy, a trap meant to dismantle their fleeting hopes. Heads shook, bodies quaked, but the melody grew louder and more insistent, calling them into a dark embrace. People around him started to hesitate again, those fearful looks creeping back as doubt seeped in. We can't give in. We've come too far. The words felt weak amidst the cacophony, but he doubled down, digging deep. Only together can we break its hold. Then, with a chilling jolt, another wave slammed against the lifeboat, tipping precariously. Thomas gasped as the figures beside him struggled not to tumble into the maw of the depths. But in that swirling chaos, one desperate soul pushed forward, grasping at the lifeboat's edge, their wild eyes tearing through Thomas's resolve. Thomas! I can't! She cried, loss edging every frantic syllable. It was a heart-wrenching wail, but no. He wouldn't let her fall. With renewed focus, he lunged forward, gripping her wrist just as she slipped further. The battle against unseen forces surged around them, clashing against their very essence, yet now, amidst the terror, a question loomed larger than life. What was being sacrificed for? Survival? Who would prevail, those who fought or those lured into the call of the dark? The shadows recoiled, but as Thomas held tight, he felt a deeper truth rumbling in his chest. Was it merely the haunted depth they feared, or was the true horror lurking in their own hearts? And in that moment, clinging to hope beneath a chorus of terror, something else shifted in the water, something infinitesimally darker, slithering dangerously close, waiting to pounce. What new revelation would spring forth when dawn finally broke over the chaos? Would they escape, or was this only the beginning of their descent into madness? The grip on her wrist was all that anchored her to reality. Thomas could feel the icy tendrils of despair creeping into his own mind, whispering doubts, urging submission. But he wasn't ready to let go, not now, not ever. Hold on. I won't let you fall, he shouted, his voice a frayed lifeline in the chaos. She was slipping, panic glazing her eyes, her child wailing in fear behind her. Around them, the tendrils of darkness writhed restlessly, eager to reclaim their prey. Just then, a flash of silver darted across the surface. The creature was circling back, a predator honing in on its quarry. Thomas could see its massive form shifting just beneath the water, muscles rippling, preparing to strike. The others were losing focus, some staring fearfully into the abyss, entranced by the siren's song. Snap out of it. You're stronger than this. He yelled to the others, desperation mingling with rage. Each of them was battling their demons as fiercely as he was, but the haunting melody wrapped around their minds like a vice, squeezing hope from their hearts. With one last burst of desperation, Thomas pulled with all his might. The woman's body jerked, and for a heartbeat, he thought he would pull her back fully. But the rise of another wave sent them both stumbling, a collective gasp filling the air as they all teetered closer to that dreadful edge. Help her! He called out, eyes scanning the lifeboat, searching for anyone willing to pull the weight of hope alongside him. It was then he felt something brush against his leg, a slick, cool surface. It was the monster, just inches away, its grotesque form now rising from the water, eyes like dark pools glimmering with hunger. The immediate stench of brine and something rotten filled his senses, threatening to drown him. Hurry! He barked, exerting himself to keep his balance as he focused on the woman. A few faces turned, their expressions awash with terror. One, a young man with a set jaw, stepped forward, a paddle in hand. Count on me, he said, eyes fierce, and before Thomas could respond, he lunged, grasping the woman's free arm, pulling with a strength born of sheer fear. Together, they fought against the pull of the abyss. The thrum of the monster's song was a cacophony now, and Thomas could feel its weight. Each note resonated deep in his bones, threatening to shake loose the fragile hold he had on his will. Push back against it. he urged, the words spilling from his mouth like a desperate litany. Fight. Remember why you're here. Suddenly, the young man's grip slipped as a powerful wave crashed over the edge, soaking everything in salt and fear. The lifeboat rocked violently. The mother let out a shriek as her child slid precariously toward the side, teetering like a leaf in a storm. Thomas didn't think. He dove forward without a second of hesitation, reaching for the child, his heart racing. Time warped. Everything slowed, and his fingers latched onto the small arm, pulling with every ounce of his being. The sound of chaos blurred into the background, the creature, the song, everything faded into nothingness as he focused solely on that child, and then they tumbled back together, all three of them gasping in a heap, hearts pounding, tears mixing with seawater. But Thomas didn't have time to celebrate the small miracle. A chilling growl emanated from just beneath the surface, recruiting dread to reassemble itself in the eager hearts around him. The creature surged upward again, and this time it was angry. What does it want? Someone cried out, fear rising in their throat. But Thomas had no answer. It wasn't just the shadows they were fighting anymore, it was something deeper, something they had barely begun to understand. As the waves crashed over their collective resolve, he braced himself, prepared for the next assault. But within the chaos, he felt an inkling of truth creeping between the shadows. They weren't just facing a monstrous beast. They were being confronted by the darkness within themselves, resonating with the siren's song. What unspoken fears and regrets were rising to the surface along with the creature? And right as the monster lunged again, teeth bared in hungry anticipation, an icy realization hit Thomas like a wave as if this was all a test. A question hung in the air, unasked but palpable: how far would each of them go to reclaim what they had lost? With the creature twisting dangerously nearby, the stakes climbed higher. How long could he hold on to hope, despite the shadows threatening to consume him? Would they withstand the onslaught, or would the darkness prevail? In that moment, an otherworldly roar shook the very air as another wave crashed, but this time, it was joined by a different sound, one that resonated deeper, an echo of humanity's greatest fears, rolling forth from the depths of their hearts. The chaos collapsed around them as Thomas caught his breath, his heart still hammering in his chest. But that moment of respite was short-lived. The monstrous figure of the creature loomed closer, emerging from the water like a nightmare made flesh. Every muscle, every jagged tooth was an invitation to despair, and Thomas felt the darkness pressing against his mind, threatening to drown out everything he held dear. "Stay back!" he shouted, pushing his body between the creature and the others, ready to defend them with whatever he had left. The water churned violently, frothing with rage as the monster's roar reverberated through the air, sounding like a blend of thunder and sorrow. A wave crashed against the lifeboat, sending them all sprawling. Faces twisted in horror, eyes wide and pleading for salvation. One glance at the woman holding her child tightly and Thomas's resolve reignited. Beneath the terror, he saw the flicker of something else, a residual spark of courage. He had to revitalize that spirit, or they would be lost. "Everyone, listen!" he yelled above the cacophony. "You're not alone. Remember what you care about. Fight for them." He scanned the faces and saw fear morphing into determination. That small shift sent adrenaline through him like fire, igniting the fight within. With a synchronized effort, the group rallied closer, the young man with the paddle positioning himself beside Thomas. Together, they formed a makeshift barrier, ready to face the oncoming wave of both water and horrors. But just then, the creature lunged again, twisting through the turbulent surf, unstoppable and fueled by their fears. "Keep your eyes on it," Thomas urged, trembling hands adjusting his grip on whatever he could find. "We can't let it seize us." But the darkness was cunning. Its song grew louder, sharper, aiming directly at their deepest regrets, the missed chances, the lost loved ones. It was whispering secrets they had tried to bury, surfacing with the waves, a storm of guilt washing over them as they fought. Suddenly, a shriek shattered the air. A man had stumbled backward, fingers twitching. I can't take it," he cried, eyes glazed, entranced by the siren's haunting melody that echoed inside his head. No. Thomas fought against the instinct to give up himself, pushing back. You are stronger. You remember your family, don't you? Use that love. The man hesitated, the flicker of recognition struggling against the growing tide of despair. Thomas seized the moment. Focus on their faces. Pull them back to you. No one deserves this. As if spurred by a primal instinct, the man closed his eyes, clenching his fists in a desperate bid to shut out the noise, and slowly regained his footing. He was reminded of laughter, of love, all the reasons he had fought to keep moving forward. One by one, those around them began to awaken, shaking off the monstrous influence, reforming the line of courage. Then, with a deep surge, the creature struck, crashing forth in a wave of furious water, a monstrous tail lashing through the air. Thomas braced himself, adrenaline coursing through him as the world spun. He felt the cold water slam against his back, knocking him down. But in the swirling chaos, he saw it a glimmer beneath the creature's dark shape. What is it? He thought, his curiosity igniting in the face of dread. The shape below the surface glimmered, an alluring light peeking through the murky depths. Just as he was trying to piece it together, the monstrous figure rose above them again, eyes locking onto Thomas with an unyielding hunger. The sound of its growl echoed like a distant storm rolling in. An unshakable fear gripped him. If they didn't figure out what the creature was hiding, all could be lost. What truth lay beneath those dark waters, and could they uncover it in time to save everyone? Would this revelation turn the tide toward their salvation, or would it drag them deeper into despair? The water roared around them, churning as though alive. Thomas struggled to regain his footing, eyes glued to that eerie glimmer beneath the beast's shadow. Whispers surrounded him, ghostly echoes of their past squeezing tighter. Each moment stretched into an eternity, fear crawling up his spine. The creature bared its jagged teeth, and for a dreadful heartbeat, it felt like time stopped. Something primal stirred deep inside him, a pull to the shining object below that promised clarity amid the chaos. What if his breath hung in the air, suspended by the weight of uncertainty? Thomas. The young man beside him gripped his arm tightly, pulling him back from the edge of recklessness. We need to focus. The monster I know. Thomas snapped back, frustration flooding his veins. He shot a glance at the others, fear etched across their faces once more. The woman with the child had shifted, eyes darting between the water and him, her pulse rapid with anxiety. I can't let them down. The creature roared again, a sound that clawed at their minds. That spot of light shimmered like a beacon, growing brighter as if calling to him in desperation. We need to distract it. He shouted, feeling urgency grip him. Buy me a moment. Without waiting for further agreement, Thomas launched a nearby fishing net into the air, aiming at the creature's eyes. The net caught the wind, twisting through the air like a last-ditch effort to hold on to hope. If he could just fend it off, perhaps he could uncover the truth hiding beneath the waves. The beast surged forward, swatting the net aside like it was nothing. But in that split second of distraction, Thomas took a breath and dove into the water, plunging into the icy depths. The moment he submerged, the noise of the chaos above muffled into a distant roar. The cold enveloped him, ice puncturing his lungs. Panic began to claw at the edges of his sanity, but then there it was again, that glimmer, pulling him towards it like a magnet. He swam deeper, heart pounding like a drum against the relentless press of water. The light danced just out of reach, teasing him with its promise of safety. Was it a trick, or was it something real? Breathing became a frantic affair as the darkness swirled around him, the chanting whispers amplifying, pulling him further into despair. A flash of memory, the face of his mother, laughing, filled his mind. I can't give in, he thought fiercely. Not now. He stretched out a hand, feeling the heated pulse of magic against his skin. It was just below him, he could sense it, as though the water itself beckoned him forward. The creature's growl throbbed in his ears like a warning bell. As he plunged closer, adrenaline ignited his resolve. He felt the truth hidden beneath those turbulent waves would not save him alone. He needed the group, their strength blended with his own. Resisting the phantom grip of terror, he kicked with all his might, seeking that glow, but suddenly, a wave roared overhead, crashing down with the force of a freight train. It sucked him down, and darkness enveloped him completely. His mind whirled, and for a moment, he was lost in the abyss, caught between reality and nightmare. As his lungs burned, he caught a flicker of movement beside him. A shape darted through the depths. Unclear but unmistakable, it was something alive, something other than the beast above. Then he felt a tug at his wrist. It was the young man, pulling urgently, fighting to bring him back to the surface. "Thomas!" he shouted, voice slicing through the cold. With a powerful kick, he pulled them both upward, breaking through the surface as the tumult of water and monsters swirled above them. Gasping for air, Thomas blinked against the daylight, desperate to grasp what had just happened. The truth beneath drew nearer, but with the creature now agitated and furious, time was running out. "What is that light?" he managed to rasp, catching the faces of the others in the lifeboat, their expressions a mixture of hope and fear. "It's pulling you, Thomas," the young man said, breathless. "But can it save us?" The creature arched above them once more, hungry and relentless. What secrets lay beneath its dark dominion? Could they unearth a way to fight back, or would they all succumb to the abyss? The answers beckoned, but would they be worth the price? The air was thick with terror and regret, the aftermath of the chaos settling like a heavy fog as the monstrous creature thrashed above them. Thomas, heart racing, looked around at the lifeboat and the faces of the survivors clinging desperately to hope. The young man who had saved him faced him again, worry etched deep across his brow, eyes darting from Thomas to the churning waters. "We can't just wait here to be picked off one by one," Thomas shouted, urgency crackling through the air. "We need to work together. Whatever that light is, it could be our salvation." With a nod, the young man rallied the others, a fierce resolve beginning to brew among the group. The haunting melody of the abyss still echoed, whispering seductions that promised safety in surrender. Thomas could see it in their eyes, uncertainty battling against the flicker of determination. They focused on the light, shimmering just beneath the murky depths. "Let us create a distraction," Thomas suggested, brandishing an oar like a sword, rallying the spirits around him. "Draw it away while I dive again." His breath caught in his throat as doubt flickered at the edges of his mind, yet the faces surrounding him fueled his courage. They were scared but ready to fight back. They huddled close, their collective intention and heartbeat synchronizing, united against their fear. As the creature rose again, Thomas locked eyes with the woman holding her child. "Don't let go of that love," he shouted, and it seemed to spark something within her. The group nodded, a primal instinct roaring to life. They took a deep breath and, in a surge of energy, began slamming their paddles against the sides of the boat, emitting a cacophony of noise that redirected the creature's attention. It lunged, jaws snapping at the disturbance above, yet Thomas didn't wait. He took a leap into the icy depths, plunging towards that captivating light. Cold water rushed over him, but the light pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding him deeper. Fear threatened to engulf him, the darkness wrapping around him, caressing like icy hands. But he fought against it, fueled by their camaraderie, the warmth of countless threads weaving hope through his veins. As he reached the glow, clarity washed over him. It was a fragment of the Titanic, an old, engraved locket dangled like a prisoner in the abyss. Grasping it firmly, Thomas felt a surge of energy, his heart synchronizing with the rhythm of the ship's past, each echo resonating with those who had come before him. It was then he understood that the truth beneath these waters wasn't just a reflection of solitude and despair, it was the unity of all souls who had loved and lost. Thomas swam upward, surging through the water toward the surface and bursting free. He gasped, locket in hand, holding it high for everyone to see, a beacon of hope sparkling against the darkness. "I found it. The light, this symbol," Thomas shouted, still breathless but filled with conviction. "It represents everything we fight for. Love, togetherness, those we lost. We can't let fear take over." The roar of the creature came again, sweeping over them like a storm. It lunged, furious, but this time they were prepared. The crowd rallied together, paddles raised, hearts synced, strengthening their voices to drown out the haunting melody. Fight! They shouted in unison, challenging the darkness. With shared determination, they began to push back. Thomas thrust the locket forward, holding it high, and as they lifted their paddles united in strength, a brilliant glow emanated from the locket, casting radiant beams that cut through the shadows in the water. The creature hesitated, recoiling from the light, its growls shifting to desperate wails. For a moment, the water stilled, as if the world itself held its breath. In that instant, Thomas realized their collective humanity had ignited a powerful force, a light that dispelled not just the shadow above, but also the demons lurking within their hearts. Now! He urged, and together they surged. Hope crashed against despair, and with every paddling strike, the monstrous figure was pushed back, shimmering shadows twisting around it like helpless wraiths. The ocean roared around them, transforming into a grand symphony of rebellion. They weren't victims anymore, they were warriors, fighting for their lives against the darkness. With one final push, the creature recoiled, its massive form melting back into the depths, sucked away by the bright, unyielding energy. The night air glimmered, filled with the sweet scent of victory mixed with salt water. What had threatened to consume them shrank from existence, leaving only an echo of its haunting call fading with the tide. Exhausted but united, Thomas and the others bobbed in the lifeboat, hearts pounding, breaths shaky but alive. They gazed at each other, a shared understanding blossoming amongst them, a recognition that they had weathered the storm together. As dawn broke over the horizon, its colors bleeding warmth into the dark night, hope spread across their faces. They were still here, together, battered but unbroken, bound by an experience that would forever tie them to one another. "Thank you," Thomas said softly to the mother, who held her child tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. "No, thank you," she replied, smiles beginning to blossom around them. "We found each other." With that, a new chapter awaited them, full of promise and connection beyond the monstrous terrors of the night. They would carry the lessons of this fateful journey, forever transformed, letting the light inside them shine brighter than any shadow that dared to creep back. Together, they began their long voyage home, not just as survivors, but as a family, shaped and forged in the crucible of hardship, determined to honor the legacy of those who had passed. And as the sun broke free from the horizon's grasp, they all saw a glimmer of what lay ahead. A new dawn, whispered like a prayer, shimmering with possibility. Before they could settle into that soft afterglow, a voice rang out over the waters, quick and full of excitement. "You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for our story. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep us alive. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to see how light can conquer darkness. And flood the comments section with your thoughts about this conclusion. We want to hear from you. Your voice matters for this community." And with that, the journey continued, holding the spirit of resilience and togetherness tightly within each of them.